Hello and welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I'm Jawad Tehami and these are the headlines. Russian President Vladimir Putin has warned of a harsh and swift response to any foreign provocations. Speaking in his annual State of the Nation speech, Putin said Moscow strives to have good relations with other countries and hopes no foreign state would cross Russia's red lines. The Russian president's statement comes amid ongoing standoff with Ukraine. Germany has announced plans to pull out its troops from Afghanistan from early July following the last week decision by the US to withdraw by the 11th of September. But the Defense Ministry said the final decision rests with NATO. With 1,100 troops, Germany has the second biggest contingent of soldiers in the country after the US. In India, 22 coronavirus patients lost their lives in a hospital due to a shortage of oxygen following massive leakage of the gas from a tanker. The country is currently in the eye of the COVID-19 storm, recording more than 2,000 deaths and nearly 300,000 infections in a day. Here in Pakistan, the virus claimed another 148 lives and infected nearly 5,500 people in the last 24 hours. Globally, there are now over 3 million deaths and more than 143 million infections. In a landmark verdict, a 12-member U.S. jury has convicted former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin of murdering George Floyd. The jury found Chauvin guilty of all three charges of second and third-degree murder and manslaughter. Speaking at the White House, President Joe Biden termed the decision a giant step towards justice in the U.S. He added, systemic racism is a stain on the whole nation's soul. Those were the headlines and detailed stories right after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back, and now with the news in detail. Russian President Vladimir Putin has warned of a harsh and swift response to any foreign provocations. In his annual address to the nation, Putin said Moscow seeks to have good ties with other countries and hopes no foreign state will cross its red lines. He warned not to mistake Moscow's good intentions for weakness. His comments come at a time when relations with the West are strained over Ukraine and the health of Kremlin critic Alexei Navalny. Last week, the U.S. tightened sanctions on Russia over accusations of hacking and election interference, while the Czech Republic accused Moscow of a role in explosions at an arms depot in 2014. Both expelled Russian diplomats, with Moscow responding with tit-for-tat expulsions. Germany has announced plans to start withdrawing its troops deployed in Afghanistan from early July, but a Defense Ministry spokesperson says the final decision in this regard rests with NATO. With 1,100 troops, Germany has the second biggest contingent of soldiers in the country after the US. The United States has announced plans to pull out all forces by September the 11th, later than the May 1st deadline. That would coincide with the 20th anniversary of the terror attacks on the World Trade Center and the Pentagon in 2001. NATO has also confirmed allies would begin withdrawing troops from the 1st of May. Angered at the delay in the withdrawal, the Taliban decided to shun all summits, including the upcoming talks in Turkey. Ankara has announced the postponement of the conference, saying the meeting will be meaningless without the Taliban's participation. The US State Department hasn't yet confirmed the postponement. The talks in Istanbul were scheduled for this Saturday to fast-track a peace agreement between the Taliban and the Afghan government. The US says talks between Iran and the world powers in Vienna to save the 2015 nuclear accord have been positive. Talking to the reporters, the State Department spokesperson Ned Price said, however, a long road remains ahead.
Price said US envoy Rob Malley has been exploring concrete approaches on steps that need to be taken by Washington and Tehran. Meanwhile, Iran's President Hassan Rouhani says a conclusion can be reached soon if the US acts honestly. Iran's top negotiator Abbas Araghchi warned that whenever the talks move towards demanding too much, killing time, or illogical bargaining, Tehran will exit the negotiations. European Union's representative Enrique Mora announced a third working group to address sequencing of practical steps. Meanwhile, Saudi Arabia has asked the international community to reach a stricter agreement this time with strong monitoring and control measures. The talks are set to resume next week.
Pakistan's Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi has thanked Iranian President Hassan Rouhani and Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei for supporting Islamabad's stance on Indian-occupied Kashmir. Qureshi met Rouhani and conveyed the goodwill message from Pakistan's President Arif Alvi and Prime Minister Imran Khan. Pakistan's Foreign Office says ways to further strengthen the age-old bond between the two brotherly countries were discussed. President Rouhani expressed resolve to enhance bilateral ties with Pakistan. He called for a stronger coordination in trade, investment, communication channels, and border management. In Pakistan, 148 more people have lost their lives to COVID-19 in the past 24 hours. The Health Ministry said the countrywide death tally has now risen to 16,600. The ministry said almost 5,500 people tested positive for the virus overnight. It said the positivity rate is 11.63%. The caseload has crossed 772,000, out of which more than 672,000 have recovered. The number of active cases has risen to over 83,000, while more than 4,500 of them are critical. Meanwhile, the National Command and Operations Center will meet today to consider a travel ban from more countries after India. In India, at least 22 COVID-19 patients have died in a hospital in the western Nashik city after they lost oxygen supply due to a leak. This comes as the country is facing a surge in the coronavirus cases that soaks up supplies of the crucial gas. Officials say the incident occurred during refilling of an oxygen tanker, but the cause of the accident is not yet clear. India is in the middle of a deadly second wave of infections, recently reporting over 200,000 cases daily. The surge has overwhelmed the country's hospitals, creating a shortage of oxygen beds and life-saving drugs. India has logged its highest single-day COVID-19 deaths and infections. The country has registered over 2,000 fatalities and more than 295,000 cases overnight. Globally, the virus has claimed more than 3 million lives and infected over 142.6 million people. More in this report.
The newly published World Health Organization's data shows the world saw a record-setting new COVID-19 cases over the last 7 days. The largest increase of 57% occurred in Southeast Asia, where India accounted for 94% of infections and nearly 28% of new cases worldwide. India now averages nearly 10,000 cases and 70 deaths per hour as the government struggles to manage the surge. Meanwhile, millions continue to return to rural areas even on foot due to lockdown in major cities.
I did not get on any bus or train in the Anand Vihar area, so I am searching for other means of transportation. And if I do not get anything, I will have to walk to the village. My company has been closed due to the lockdown. Last year as well, when lockdown was imposed, I had to walk back all the way to my home.
Over in Europe, Turkey reported a record number of single-day deaths as the virus claimed 346 lives in the past 24 hours. Britain has launched a search for antivirals to serve as effective at-home treatments by the end of the year. The Netherlands is set to ease restrictions from next week as pressure to reopen society mounts despite high infection rates. Meanwhile, the European Medicines Agency has found a link between Johnson & Johnson's vaccine and blood clotting. But it says the overall benefits of Johnson & Johnson's vaccines outweigh any risks.
The PROC has concluded that there is a possible link between the occurrence of these blood clots combined with the low levels of blood platelets, thrombocytopenia, and the vaccination with the COVID-19 vaccine Janssen. The product information will be updated to reflect this information and will include a warning and an update of the side effects.
Janssen says it will resume its vaccine shipment to the European Union, Norway and Iceland. Sweden has announced to give a different second dose to people under the age of 65 who received the first dose of AstraZeneca. In the United States, despite an impressive vaccination drive, experts believe the country still remains in a complicated stage of the pandemic. Meanwhile, one of the worst hit countries, Brazil, registered 3,321 new deaths and over 69,000 infections in the past 24 hours.
In a landmark verdict, a 12-member U.S. jury has convicted former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin of murdering George Floyd. The decision comes as a milestone in the fraught racial history of the United States. More in this report.
After considering testimonies from 45 witnesses in the trial spanning over 3 weeks, the Minneapolis court jury found Derek Chauvin guilty of all 3 charges of second and third degree murder and manslaughter. Speaking at the White House, President Joe Biden termed the decision a giant step towards justice in the United States. Biden said systematic racism is a stain on the national soul.
No one should be above the law. And today's verdict sends that message. But it's not enough. We can't stop here. In order to deliver real change and reform, we can and we must do more to reduce the likelihood that tragedies like this will ever happen and occur again.
Meanwhile, Floyd's family said they are relieved over the conviction of the 19-year police veteran. At a news conference, they said they feel like they can breathe again. Floyd's family attorney, Benjamin Crump, said the moment is historic, not just for Floyd, but the country.
And we're going to try to leave here today knowing that America is a better country.
Yes. Yes, yes.
Mm-hmm. America, let's pause for a moment to proclaim this historical moment, not just for the legacy of George Floyd, but for the legacy of America.
The verdict prompted celebratory scenes outside the court as well as across the country. Meanwhile, police in Columbus, Ohio, fatally shot a teenage black girl while responding to a report of a person armed with a knife. In a tweet, Columbus Mayor Andrew Ginther confirmed the fatal shooting, calling it a tragedy.
It's time for a short break. I will be back with more stories. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Greece and Saudi Arabia have signed a deal to lend a Patriot air defense system to the kingdom. Greek Foreign Minister Nikos Dandias met his Saudi counterpart Faisal bin Farhan in Riyadh. In a press release, Dandias said the deal will contribute to the wider security of energy sources for the West. Athens also signed a cooperation agreement with the Gulf Cooperation Council and called it a big step forward. Dandias and Greek Defense Minister Nikolaos Panagiotopoulou also met Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. This follows an escalation in drone strikes on vital Saudi targets by Yemen's Houthis. Lebanon says peace with Tel Aviv remains far-fetched as long as there is no real peace between Israel and Palestine. UN envoy Amal Muddalali said Beirut continues to support the official Arab position on a two-state solution. Speaking at a webinar, she said Lebanon paid the price for attempts to have uncomprehensive peace agreements with Israel. This comes a week after the US said talks between Israel and Lebanon will benefit Beirut's crisis-hit economy. The International Libya Quartet has expressed readiness for a robust and effective ceasefire monitoring mechanism in Libya. The UN, the EU, the Arab League and the African Union have also called on Libyan factions to speed up the ceasefire implementation efforts. In a joint statement, the quartet members called for the immediate and unconditional withdrawal of all foreign forces from Libya. Earlier, the UN Security Council unanimously voted to send up to 60 international monitors to Libya to oversee the ceasefire. Syria has been stripped of its voting rights at the Global Chemical Weapons Watchdog by the member states. The ruling comes after Syrian forces were found to have repeatedly used poison gas during Syrian civil war. A majority of the members of the Organization for Prohibition of Chemical Weapons supported the decision to immediately revoke Syria's privileges at the agency. The draft document to ban Damascus rights was proposed by 46 nations, including the US, Britain and France. It was circulated among the 193 members at the Hague-based agency. The Chadian rebels have rejected a military transition and vowed to march on the capital N'Djamena. The military transition is led by the son of President Idriss Deby, who was killed in the battle against the rebels. In a statement, the rebels said Chad is not a monarchy and there can be no dynastic devolution of power in the country. Earlier, the Military Transitional Council named Mehmet Idriss Deby as interim president for the next 18 months. Meanwhile, world leaders have offered their condolences over the death of Idriss Deby. In a statement, the White House said that the US stands with the people of Chad during this difficult time. French President Emmanuel Macron said Paris has lost a key ally in the fight against the militants in the Sahel region. Pakistan has been elected to 3 key United Nations bodies. These bodies include the Commission on Crime Prevention and Criminal Justice, the Commission on the Status of Women, and the Commission on Population and Development. Pakistan's envoy Munir Akram says this reflects the international community's recognition of the country's positive role at the UN. It was the 6th time that Pakistan got elected to the Justice Commission. Meanwhile, it triumphed with 50 out of 53 votes in the election for the membership of the Commission on the Status of Women. Pakistan will assume the membership of the 3 commissions on January the 1st next year. Pakistan is observing the 83rd death anniversary of the national poet and philosopher Dr. Allama Muhammad Iqbal. He conceived the idea of a separate homeland for the Muslims of the subcontinent. Born in November 1877 in Sialkot, Iqbal breathed his last on April the 21st, 1938 in Lahore. His most popular works include Asrar-e-Khudi, Bang-e-Dara, Bale-Jibril and Zarb-e-Kalim. The European Union has clinched a deal on a climate change law. The law will commit the EU to more than halving its net greenhouse gas emissions by the end of 2030. In a tweet, Commission Vice President Frans Timmermans said this is a landmark moment for the EU. He said the EU reached the deal to write climate neutrality target into legislation as a guide to policies for the next 30 years. The agreement follows intense negotiations between the European Parliament and the EU member states after months of deadlock. EU lawmakers wanted to go further to 60%, but environmental campaigners had said the cut should be 65%. The deal still needs formal approval from the Parliament and the national governments. The International Atomic Energy Agency says it hopes South Korea's experts will take part in the monitoring of the Fukushima water release. This comes as Seoul mulls Japan's offer to take part in the UN nuclear watchdog-led verification efforts amid growing health risks concerns. In an interview, IAEA Director General Rafael Mariano Grossi said a collaboration of experts from South Korea will be very valuable. Grossi said the IAEA is an impartial technical body and does not take sides. He added the body's mission is to ensure complete adherence to international standards before, during and after the operation. Japan plans to release over 1.25 million tons of contaminated water from its Fukushima nuclear power plant into the Pacific Ocean. In South Korea, a court has rejected a claim by the country's sexual slavery victims seeking compensation from Japan over their wartime sufferings. About 240 South Korean women had registered as victims of sexual slavery by Japan's military in World War II, of whom 15 are still alive. Seoul's Central District Court ruled Tokyo should be exempted from civil jurisdiction under the principles of international law. Victims' representatives denounced the decision, saying the court ignored their struggles to restore the women's honor and dignity. Japan insists all wartime compensation issues were settled under a 1965 treaty that normalized relations with South Korea. The two countries agreed to irreversibly end the dispute in a 2015 deal. Asian shares have fallen as concerns about a resurgence of coronavirus cases in some countries worry investors. Fresh restrictions cast doubt on the strength of the global growth and demand for crude oil. MSCI's broadest index of Asia-Pacific shares outside Japan fell more than 1%. Australian stocks dropped just above 0.5%. But shares in China rose marginally due to positive earnings from the healthcare and banking sectors. Japan's Nikkei 225 slumped by close to 2% due to the growing likelihood of lockdown in Tokyo, Osaka, and surrounding areas. Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index has dived close to 2%, while the Kospi in Seoul dipped over 1%. In football, Chelsea made it to the top four of the Premier League after sharing a goalless draw with Brighton at home. The draw lifts the Blues to fourth place on the goal difference above West Ham United. The hosts struggled to find a way through the well-marshalled defence of relegation-threatened Brighton. Chelsea's every attack was mopped up by the visitors' back line, led by captain Lewis Dunk. Brighton substitute Adam Lallana missed a chance to win the game in the 77th minute, firing wide of the net. Brighton remains 16th in the league and are 7 points clear of the relegation zone with 6 games to play. And that's all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus News.